host, Mike Klein. In this series, we are going to meet some of the world's comms disruptors. These are people working in and around communication who are really changing the game, challenging old assumptions, acting on new ideas, and demonstrating a willingness to share those ideas. Today's guest is no exception, Adedoyin Jaiyesimi. Adedoyin is the founder of the Comms Avenue, a thriving community of over 1,500 communication professionals from across Africa. 4 years ago, she wrote her first book, From Clueless to Success, a collection of 20 backstories from a professional journey as a communication professional. She advises organizations on how to strategically leverage the power of communication to achieve organizational objectives. She's active in engaging public sector stakeholders on the effective use of communication in the public policy process, and she's consulted for a wide range of organizations, including the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Fountain of Life Church, the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, Leading Ladies Africa, and the African Philanthropy Forum. Beyond her consulting and community building efforts, Adedoyin runs training services or training sessions for communication professionals, employees, and executive teams in corporate organizations and entrepreneurs in strategic communication, storytelling, and writing. She is a frequent lecturer, moderator, and discussion leader, and I'm thrilled to have her on this podcast. Welcome today. Very happy to have you here.
Thank you so much, Mike. I'm excited to be here.
So just to open up here, my stock opening question, the question that I tend to ask most people who appear on this podcast with me is, what do you see as the greatest opportunities facing communication leaders around the world?
I really love this question because I believe it's an exciting time to be a communications professional. When I watch the news, when I listen to business leaders, when I listen to founders, at the heart of the things they're talking about, there's always an element of communication, which is really, really exciting to me. So what I see as the opportunity for communications professionals across the world is really how do we leverage our skills in terms of articulating how central and valuable our role is, and then advising business leaders, non-profit leaders, public sector leaders, giving them counsel, helping them to achieve their objectives. We're talking about trust and license to operate. It all falls into communication. So how do we remain as custodians of the brand? How do we help business leaders, senior leaders to build and maintain trust? So it's really an exciting opportunity for communications professionals, but we really need to hone in on that centrality of what we do and the value that we're adding to organizations.
So really what you're saying here kind of branches in two different directions. One
Mm.
is around the centrality of what we do. The second is around the relationship that we have with senior leaders. We'll
Yes.
talk in a second about the senior leaders, but in terms of the centrality of what we do, to what extent are you finding that people that you engage with are seeing what we do as central and
So
acknowledging that?
yeah, so I'll bring back the senior people because there are two dimensions, right? There's the fact that the senior leaders or the publics that we engage with, the stakeholders, still have a very limited understanding of what communications is. So I'll give you an example of a conversation I had recently. Someone is saying, "Oh, Adedoyin, I speak so well. I love speaking to people. I want to be a communications professional." I'm like, yeah, speaking may be part of it, but that's not the core of what we do as communicators. So there's that assumption that they know what the work is, they know what we do. Meanwhile, they really don't. So there's that understanding of how do we get them to understand. Now, more and more people are seeing the value, and which leads me to the next part, is we as communications professionals ourselves, do we really know the depth of the work? Do we really understand how valuable what we're doing is? Are we really delivering results that are important to whatever organization that we're engaging with? Because as we do that, people then understand that this is why this is essential. This is why communication is at the center. It's really, really critical. And then the third part, if I'm going to add a third part, is because there's somewhat a low barrier to entry. So someone can pick up their phone, they're great with content, they're great with social media, and then they call themselves communications professional, and then they get on a brief and don't do a great job, which is not good for us. So that also feeds into it. So I feel like what we need to do is keep advocating to say, look, this is the value, we deliver the results, we educate the stakeholders, and we're going to be seeing that turnaround in terms of them really understanding that this is why what we do as a function is absolutely critical.
Well, I think that that again branches off in a couple of different directions. I mean, certainly the barriers to entry conversation, we can talk about that in a second. But I guess one of the things you mentioned is that speaking alone isn't at the core of what we do.
Yeah.
And that a lot of people who, because they have mastered one facet of what we do, think that they're all around experts. But what would you say are the most important core elements of what we do that make us distinctive, as experts and as leaders in organizations?
First off is our strategic thinking skills. Being able to develop a strategy, being able to see, okay, this business needs to go this direction. This organization wants to achieve this. This is the local context. This is the global context. What can we do as communicators to get them not just to where they want to go, but where they need to be? So you have to have that level of thinking to be able to say, this organization wants to go in this direction, but they can go in another direction. How do I influence them? How do I show them something better? How do I build on that? And I think that that's absolutely critical. Our strategy development and implementation skills. And I would also say influence, because the higher you go in your career, you're engaging with stakeholders that have a set way of doing things. Now, if you're going to come from a strategic perspective, being a strategic advisor, you must be able to convince them and show them that this other thing that you are suggesting or you are advising them to do as best practice or in their best interest, this is why it is important. You must be able to influence on that level. And then obviously the skill of writing, I always say you need to be a good writer. I think it's absolutely important. The rest of the skills, it's not that they're not important. So your media relation skills, for example, your relationship building, I think that's another one I would put there, relationship building, because we are actually the custodians of relationships. We must be able to listen, we must be able to build relationships, to work on those, and then master the tactical skills as is required for your own particular context. If you're working in the health sector, for example, or in the finance sector, but strategy is going to cut across, relationship building is going to cut across, influence is definitely going to cut across.
You mentioned influence and particularly the ability to work with senior stakeholders. To what extent do you also see that as a barrier that a lot of people are facing at the moment?
It is a barrier, and there are two reasons why. If, for example, especially for younger professionals, it can feel quite daunting to engage with senior stakeholders, especially when, for example, this is a business leader or public sector leader that has 20, 30 years of experience, and you probably have 5 years experience in communications, and you're telling them what to do. If I speak from an African context, we have a context where there's respect for your elder, quote and unquote. So it almost seems like, am I going to challenge this person with so many decades of experience? But the truth is, they're not experts in communications. They may be experts in what they do in terms of finance, in terms of operations, but they're not experts in communication. So just having that confidence to be able to engage. I also think that it's important to have emotional awareness as well, emotional intelligence when dealing with senior leaders, because they have different temperaments, they have different things that communicate to them. So one of the barriers that I found, especially for those who work in the for-profit sector, is that you're trying to communicate the importance or the results of what you've done, but you're not speaking the business of language. So it seems to them like you've just spent a lot of money. They don't see the return on investment just because you're not communicating that in a way that they understand it. Same thing with those that work in the non-profit sector. So it's to say, okay, the C-suite, the senior leaders, what language they understand and how do I translate my result into a language that they understand and communicate that. So it's really, again, building your people skills. I don't think that you can be successful as a communicator if you're not building your people skills and your relationship building skills.
So really, you're actually talking about two types of two levels of skill. One of which, as you mentioned, is the emotional intelligence and the relationship building. But you also speak to a certain level of business literacy that you need to be able to understand and relate to how the organization serves its customers or otherwise makes money. Um, Given what you're doing around training and education and community building, how did you start the Comms Avenue? What's the Comms Avenue story, and how are you helping people to get into the space that you're talking about with, business literacy and relationship building in particular?
So I'll take you back to 2019. So at the time, I was running my own brand communications agency, and anybody who knows me and has followed my journey knows that my faith in God is very central to everything that I do. And I just had this sense that it was time to shut down that, but I didn't know what was next. And in the middle of it, because I'd been active on LinkedIn, LinkedIn was a place that I was using to get new clients, but I wasn't working on new briefs, projects. I said, okay, what do I post on my LinkedIn? And I decided from the beginning of 2020 to just share some of the mistakes, some of the lessons learned, some of the behind the scenes, because you come on LinkedIn, we're showing our wins and successes. I decided to flip the script. I didn't realize that people needed that content. People could relate, and people were asking so many questions. I'm like, okay, wait a minute. I didn't do this because I'm an expert. This is just me saying, hey, I made a mistake in this negotiation. I made this mistake in this brief. I've learned this lesson. So I thought, you know what? What if we all come together, share lessons, share challenges, you learn from me, you learn from other people, and you know that you're not alone in the journey. And so that was really how it started. It was meant to be a physical event in March 2020, but as we all know, COVID happened, and then we had to pivot online, and that's how we created the community with 50 professionals in Nigeria. However, when you create a community, one of the things you realize is that you get feedback, you get insight. So we started to see, oh, people need this, people like that. And because COVID, a lot of professionals from across the continent were really open. So it was just reaching out to say, can you come and share your story in the group? And that was how we began to build. Today, we're at 1,500 professionals from 25 African countries, and we just hone in on capacity building and networking, giving the younger professionals access to the senior professionals to really learn from their lessons, learn from their mistakes, receive mentorship and career guidance. And then we also do the training because there is a knowledge gap, and we have to be very honest about it. There are people working in this field that really don't know the core of what we do. So we close that knowledge gap, give people access to knowledge that empowers them and gives them confidence. And that's what we've done over the last 4 years. It's been really, really exciting for me to just see the impact that we've had across the continent and even coming into Europe this month.
Oh, really? So you're bringing Comms Avenue to Europe. Tell me more about how you're doing that.
So on the 8th of June, we started with our hangouts. So we do these hangouts where we invite senior professionals in the industry to just come and talk with the younger professionals, share the lessons, share stories. It's a networking event, very, very good. We've done it across the continent, and we brought it to London this June, and it was really, really great. And one of the things we're also working on is a mentorship program for the African communications professionals that are based in London or based in the United Kingdom, actually, to also network and connect with the EMEA comms team at one of the organizations in the country as well. So that's what we're starting with. But what we've done over the last 4 years really is we respond to needs. So like I said, because there's a community, when we see, oh, there's a gap, I'll give you an example. One of the first resources that we created is called the First 100 Days in Comms Guide. And how did that start? Someone in the group says, oh, I just started this comms role and my boss is asking me for XYZ. And another person says, but you just started this role. Why are they expecting you to deliver in just less than a month? And then I started and I said, really, what is expected in the first 100 days of working in a new role? And that was how we started. We reached out to people, we reached out to some senior people to say, what do you expect from your new hires in the first 100 days? And we also asked them, what do you typically do in the first 100 days? And that resource, people use it to prepare for interviews, people use it to hit the ground running. So we just really respond to the needs that we see.
So this guide really talks people through how do you get a powerful start, and also to a certain extent how you manage the expectations of the people you're working for,
Yes.
correct? No, that totally makes sense. You mentioned your move into Europe, and particularly the focus on the UK as the next market for you. And there's a long-standing belief that the UK, the US, and other similar markets are ahead of the rest of the world when it comes to comms and PR. Having worked in the UK and doing the work that you do in Africa, is there really a gap, and how does it show up on a day-to-day basis?
I used to believe that as well, that, and because sometimes you see some of the campaigns and the work being done by organizations, agencies, professionals in the US, in the UK, and other markets. But what I've realized going from different countries, different continents, is that I see that certain markets have expertise in certain areas of communication. So, for example, I find that in the UK, there are a lot of internal communication specialists. It's a big thing here. There are other areas of communication that it feels like they're really, really good at. If you go to Africa, for example, in Kenya, really, really good at development communication. South Africa, I see a lot of marketing communications. So I find that, but in terms of the skills and the competence to deliver and implement, I find that the gap isn't so huge. Where I see the gap is in terms of the budget. So I find that in the UK, in the US, the budget that is given to the communications team of a communications project is much, much bigger than what we see for certain countries within the African continent. And then obviously, we also have now the conversations on artificial intelligence. I have found the most engaging and most in-depth conversations happening within the, UK markets, the American market more than the African market. Maybe because we're still a bit skeptical about AI, but we're also catching on. But the conversations, anytime I go into conversations on AI by experts within the UK market, I'm always so intrigued by how far they've gone. But in terms of the knowledge, the expertise, I don't think that there's a wide gap. I think that we're learning across board, and I also think that different areas have their own areas of specialization where they're strongest at.
Well, it's interesting that you talk about the budget gap. I mean, I'm somebody who has, I've really never believed that budget alone is an effective determiner of communication success. And indeed, if you're looking from a talent perspective, the ability to do things more effectively with less budget or with, you know, less executional intricacy may actually be a liberating factor as well as a constraining factor. You're mentioning AI. Could AI actually be more of a game changer in Africa than in the UK for precisely that reason?
I think across board, because AI is something that's really emerging, the way I see it is how can we use it to do more of the tactical things so that we have more free time to do the strategic things? Because if we're not using AI strategically, then we're still coming back to the same issue of people not understanding the value. So it's not just saying, oh, ChatGPT, write my press release, write my blog post. Is, are you still delivering on the strategic outcomes that this organization expects? And AI is not going to do that for you. So I'm looking forward to us leveraging AI to create more great content, to do some of the tactical works that really, really takes our time. And let me just tie back to what you had said about the budget. I totally agree with you that in certain circumstances, not having a lot of budget does make you very creative. But sometimes, and I've seen this in a number of organizations, you have only one communications person handling communications for multiple countries. So look at Africa, for example, we have 54 countries, different contexts. There's a way people try to lump up Africa as one. No, we're actually quite diverse. And someone is having to manage communications for 10 countries with limited budget. They don't have the time to be creative. They don't have the resources to get support on ground because they don't have the local context. So it hurts in that way. So for such a person, how can AI even facilitate them doing a great job with the limited budget constraints? So I think it's emerging. It's for us to see what are the opportunities here, but most importantly, how will this help us to deliver the value that we know we can deliver to the organization?
So you talked about the scope and diversity of Africa, that you have 54 countries, you've got numerous languages, you've got an immense geography. I recall a map where you actually crammed the United States, China,
Yes.
um, Argentina, and most of the major European countries, and you still didn't cover Africa.
Hmm.
And people have this, this distorted sense of both the population and the diversity there. Um, if how can a team of one function across all of those
It's literally
geographies?
almost impossible. Literally almost impossible. And that's why, this conversation that we're having, I'm saying, look, there needs to be advocacy. So one of the things I say to communications professionals that find themselves in that position, you need to speak to your senior leaders because they are assuming that one person can do this. Now that assumption is wrong based on the faulty knowledge that they have. You, as a communications advisor that should be working in a strategic role, should be able to say this cannot work. We need regional communications advisors. We need people on ground to support this information. Otherwise, we're going to hit the mark. We've seen organizations go into crisis because messaging didn't land well in a particular language. So in English, it came off well, and you translate that same thing in another language, totally missed the mark. So things like that. But I really, again, believe that it still falls to the communications professional to speak up. Because I find a lot of people are just saying, okay, you know what, I just want to get the job done. I just want to get my salary. But there's burnout. There's, working in situations where it's really difficult to deliver good work and the person is keeping quiet. So that's really one of my biggest frustrations, actually.
So really, the response of some communicators has been just to be, in defensive mode, get their head down, just,
Exactly.
generate the outputs that they're being asked to generate because they don't realistically have a chance of delivering anything comprehensive or strategic. To what extent does the comms avenue have the opportunity to perhaps provide or at least support people in providing that regional coverage?
So what we do at the Comms Avenue, like I mentioned before, is we provide education. It's to say, look, this is what your role is. These are the resources that you need to deliver your role. And then because we also have a community, people can reach out to resource persons. So if you come in and you say, I'm doing a campaign that cuts across West Africa and East Africa, and we've had that. I'm looking for partners in so and so countries. You can reach out in the community and you'll find partners. Some people reach out for media people. Some people will say, oh, I have an event in Ghana. I'm coming from Mozambique. And somebody will reach out to work with them, partner with them to do it. So that's how we really, really support the professionals. But beyond that, it's the awareness of this is what it takes. Like you want to build a house, for example, you have to count the cost. You have to realize, okay, if I want to build a skyscraper, these are the things that I need. If I want to build a bungalow, I need totally different materials. So if you're going to do this role successfully, it's even then having an understanding of what is required, who are the partners that they need, what are the resources that they need. And resources is just beyond the budget as well. Sometimes even resources for research, you will find that people don't even prioritize that, but it's so important. If you're doing regional communications, audience segmentation is so key. You really need to do the listening. How are you going to do that without research, right? So that awareness then helps them to make more informed decisions, and then they're able to advocate for the resources and the support that they need to deliver on whatever it is they need to deliver on.
So really what you're providing is not only the skills and knowledge, but you're also providing connections that can
Yes.
allow people to actually resource the kinds of projects and the kinds of approaches that are needed to deliver across the various regions of Africa.
Yes, exactly.
Now that makes a ton of sense. One of the things that I understand you're involved with is that you're in the process of getting SCMP certification from the International Association of Business Communicators. Tell
Yes.
me a bit more about your journey around the SCMP and what potential you might see for certification, across the African continent.
Okay. So, like I said earlier, my journey into communications, I pretty much stumbled into it. I have a book that literally documents my journey. But as I got into maybe my sixth or seventh year, I just started having this thing of I need knowledge. I need like a certification or something to validate what it is that I'm doing. Yes, I have the hands-on practical skills, but I really, really want the academic side. So it was between getting a certification and going for a master's degree and, spend some time praying about it. And I did a master's in communication. And Mike, it was, I don't want to say life changing, maybe I would say career defining because I got professional confidence. I learned how communications was done globally. I learned best practice. So that gave me a renewed sense of the importance of professional knowledge, academic knowledge. Now, coming out of that and joining professional associations, I realized that an important part of what I do as a communicator is my commitment to professional development. How am I developing myself? How am I honing my skills? How am I making sure that I'm the master and the best at what I do? And that's really when the SCMP came on my radar. Because a master's program can be quite intense, I took a year of academic pursuits. Like, no, I'm not reading, I'm not doing any academic. So I would just attend webinars, go for conferences. But last year, I said to myself, I need to top up my knowledge. And being in the IABC for the last 2 to 3 years, I saw a number of people talk about the SCMP. I bought the book and was like, this is actually good knowledge. And obviously, you know that you're good, but it's a different thing when an external person certifies that, yes, this person is actually great at what she does, the boost in my career. And I said, you know what, I'm going to go for it this year. And so that began my journey to certification. I applied for the Gift of Excellence grant, which I got, and I'm in the middle of just getting ready for the exam, which I'm doing this June. And for
Excellent.
me, it's really the validation of, yes, I know what I do, but also I'm committed to my professional development. And so for professionals across the continent, that's the same thing. How are you committed, or how are we committed to our professional development? The knowledge that you gain, just even reading the guide, the IABC guide, I've learned a lot from it. Different perspectives, it opens up your mind, you learn a lot of new things, and you just continue to improve yourself and be a master at your craft.
So you mentioned your involvement with communication associations, and you've successfully built and are growing a communication community. What advice or caution would you like to share with people who aim to lead in this profession, whether it's by starting their own communities, whether it's leading in existing communities, or taking their leadership in other dimensions? How would you advise people who want to lead in this profession?
So I'll continue from the last point I made, which is that commitment to professional development. It has to be there because once that is at the forefront, you then say to yourself, okay, how can I achieve this? Do I need to be part of a professional association? Now, it's not just to be part of a professional association and to write the letters. How do I get involved? So the IABC is doing a conference. Can I go there and network and learn things? Can I speak at a CIPR, conference or seminar or event? Can I contribute opinion pieces, for example, to the Catalyst or the Influence Weekly? What is it? What is that thing that I can do to help to build my knowledge, share my knowledge, and contribute to the body of knowledge within the communications industry? There's someone I follow on LinkedIn. He's always sharing the academic side of the communications and public relations. His surname is Waddington. I can't remember
Oh,
the first
Stephen
name. And I find it,
Waddington.
yes, I find it so exciting. I don't read all of the academic content, but it's so eye-opening to see that academic side, and he's contributing his own quota to the body of practice. So if you really, really want to be a leader in this field, you must be committed to that professional development. You must be learning, but you must also, I believe, be sharing the knowledge as well. Because this thing that we're saying about people not understanding what we do is because professionals are not really talking about what it is that they do, why it's important, the methodology and the best practice, the ethics, the thinking, the strategy behind it. So definitely engage with professional associations or communities, have a plan on how to be active, to give back, and also how you give back to the profession as well, and then be committed to that development, attending webinars, conferences, getting certified. It just helps you to build your professional confidence.
Got it. Got it. Is there anybody aside from Stephen? Are there any other thought leaders or folks who you're really paying attention to who you'd like to recommend to other people who are on this podcast?
Yes, so one person that she's based in Nigeria, her name is Shola Abulu. She has a LinkedIn page, YouTube channel. She's and always doing LinkedIn lives on real interesting topics, timely topics. I really love her case studies on whether it's public relations and crisis communication. So she's someone that I really follow keenly and someone that I met through the IABC because she used to be the head of the leader of the West African group, interest group of the IABC. So that's someone I really, really follow. I believe his name is Bruce. Stewart, if I'm not wrong. He talks a lot about AI in PR, and I really love his content and purposeful relations, if I'm not wrong. Yes, that's what that is. And then there's also Louise Thompson, who is a communications director. I really love how she focuses on the professional to say, look, these are the soft skills, these are the things you need to know to succeed in the professional space as a communicator. And I really love her content. There's so many others, but those are the ones that I follow on a day-to-day basis to see what they're posting.
Excellent, excellent. Is there anything else you'd like to add? Anything that we haven't discussed in this conversation so far that you think could add some value to some of the people who are listening out there?
I think I think collaboration, right? I think because during COVID kind of brought down the walls. Because I'm just reflecting on the question that you had asked me about the gap, if there was any noticeable gap in the UK market, US market, and Africa. I think there's an opportunity right now for more collaborations to learn the different lessons. So the things that the African market is strongest at, and the things that the UK market or US market are strongest at. How do we make sure that we cross share those kinds of knowledge? How do we make sure that we preserve it? We learn, for example, we're learning about internal communications from experts within the UK market, for example. So I would really love to see more of that collaboration in terms of knowledge sharing, in terms of building best practice. I know the professional associations are doing that. I'm just saying to see that on even a bigger scale would be really interesting to see.
All right. Anything else you want to add?
No, that's it.
Excellent. Well, I really would like to thank you for participating in today's conversation. It's been really eye-opening, particularly in terms of learning more about what's going on in Africa, and how you see the challenges facing communicators globally, and how the two mesh with each other. What Africa has to offer, what Africa can learn, and what the other parts of the world you see are doing well. So thank you very much, and I will also take note of the people that you've mentioned. I appreciate, particularly Shola and Bruce are people that I don't know. Louise is a wheelie comms honoree, and I've spoken with her on numerous occasions.
Oh, nice.
She's great as well. But thank you very much for your conversation today.
Thank you, Mike, for the invitation to do this and the opportunity to be on this podcast.